Hello and welcome to this edition of MidValley Update. I'm your host, Sean Davido, and today I am joined by the Granger Mayor, Dr. Hilda Gonzalez. Thank you for joining me today, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Sean. I appreciate it.
Now, we want to talk about all things Granger today, and that includes our mayor. Can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and some of the things that you enjoy?
So a little bit about myself. I'm a product of Granger. My family has deep roots here in the city of Granger. My grandparents, migrated from the state of Texas and arrived to Crewport and settled in Crewport back in the 1950s, and then transitioned their way into the city a little bit shortly thereafter. And so I'm a native to the Granger area, particularly from the matriarchal side of my family. Growing up, I was a migrant education program student. My parents are migrant farm workers, and so we traveled a great deal throughout the Lower Yakima Valley. So I usually say that I'm from Lower Yakima Valley because I lived in parts of, the areas surrounding the Lower Yakima Valley. Went to school in Wapato and Parker Heights and Hara and Brownstown, and then Granger, Toppenish and Mapton also. So a little bit of everywhere throughout the Lower Yakima Valley. Until I was about 12 years old, and then moved with my mom and my siblings to Granger, where we settled to live with my mom's family. Grew up here as a teenager, and then decided to kind of move forward with my career and my education. With my own family, starting in 2001. My family and I at the time decided to kind of explore our opportunities in the Seattle area. So moved to the Seattle area, lived there for just a really short period of time because it was really difficult to live there economically, right? For about a year, and then transitioned to the Skagit Valley, where the father of my children grew up. He grew up there, and so we settled there for about 5 years. Lived there. I worked with both the Concrete and Mount Vernon school districts at the time. My background is primarily in education. I served in education for about 25 years collectively, starting in early childhood education all the way up to higher ed. So I fulfilled several roles throughout my tenure as an educator and administrator and support system for the education system. But prior to my departure from education, I did pursue my doctorate from the University of Washington in Tacoma, and graduated in 2021 with my doctorate in educational leadership in 2021. And so decided a year later to retire and take some time for myself after that journey. And so we resided in Pullman for about 7 years, and then decided to come back home to Granger. Both the father of my children and I have deep roots, as I mentioned. I have deep roots, and so does he. And so it was kind of natural for us to just come back home and be surrounded by our family. And I've been here ever since. So that was 2013 when that happened. And so immediately upon returning, I was able to obtain a position at Yakima Valley College. And I worked there for about 8 years prior to retiring. I decided that I wanted to pivot and do something different aside from education after, the midst of COVID also. And, kind of just reset, if you will. And from that point, it's led me to where I am now. So yeah, just kind of a little bit about myself.
Yeah, you've been all over. You have an extensive resume. You've lived all over the state. And you also, as you mentioned, got a interest in local government. And when you moved back, you joined the Granger City Council. Can you talk about why that choice came about and what led you to that?
Certainly. So prior to my tenure as a city council member, I served as a committee member and then the chair for the Granger Planning Development Commission. So that was my experience leading up to city council. And I started that in 2016 because I took an interest in local government, of course, but I took an interest in the growth part of local government and wanted to learn more about how the process of growth takes place when it comes to, planning and development for city growth. And so it was really fitting for me to serve on that committee at that time and really start that knowledge building of urban planning and growth and development. And then from there, I took an interest into, further interest into local government via the city council position. And so I was a city council elect back in 2020, which of course was, the infancy stages, I would say, of the COVID pandemic. And so I started off that role online. And of course, maybe about a year and a half later, then we transitioned to in person. And it was an interesting transition because I had been a part of city government for quite some time that it almost felt like I had been there for so long that I'd even forgotten that I had never been in council chambers prior to that, because as a city council member, right? Because I was elected and we were, attending city council meetings virtually. So I had not had a presence in the city council chambers, physical one, because we were virtual, attending meetings at the time. So it was interesting to transition from, a virtual platform to a physical platform, and conducting business in that way. But I decided to run for office as a city council member because I wanted to grow my knowledge in local government. When I pursued my master's, the intent was to pursue my master's so that in time I would come back home and become the mayor for the city of Granger. So it was a way to be able to progress into this leadership leadership role that I'm in now. And understand and learn all aspects of city government on the decision making side of things. And of course, planning commission, that led to the learning process of development, and then city council led to the process of learning more about the legislative side of city government. And so they kind of go hand in hand, if you will. Now I'm in this mayor-elect role and I'm learning so much more, right? Like there's a plethora of information that is just a more global lens, if you will, of information that I'm really just absorbing and really enjoying, and being able to have the opportunity and privilege, if you will, to be in this position as a mayor full time. Unfortunately, a lot of other cities don't have that opportunity to have a mayor full time. Being that I'm semi-retired and my kids are grown and I really don't have any other obligations to myself in the city, right? I can spend and commit my time to the city in that way. And so, I'm here on a full-time basis, on a very minimal part-time, compensatory salary. So, but I love it nonetheless. It's not a position that I pursued because I wanted to be rich by any means.
Now let's talk about some of the things that the mayor does. You started in January. What are some of the things that you have already taken on, and some of the things that you didn't know you would be taking on? Maybe some of those things.
Right. Well, some of the things that I thought that were really important in the onset of this position was really just learning and understanding the business of the city, but most importantly, building and establishing relationships with the teams of individuals that are, on the ground day to day, right? And learning their roles and responsibilities so that I could help them in their roles to be successful, right? And so that was really important for me in the onset. And so I took the time to meet with the department heads of each department, Also meet with individuals in the departments themselves, tour the facilities, getting to know the work that they are involved with on a day-to-day basis, asking questions about what works, within their role, and then also the needs, to understand the business of the city. And then really just kind of be on the ground with them, because that's the best approach in learning more about their roles and responsibilities. And then also helping me understand how I can help them be successful in their roles. So that was kind of like the first, I would say, first 2 months of a lot of the groundwork that I've been working on, and then expanding that out into the community. So reaching out to individuals within agencies and organizations, the school, local businesses, religious groups, local businesses, nonprofit organizations, and coming together and doing the same thing, learning what works and then what not, what the needs are. And then also talking about the ways in which we can support the dissemination of communication, but also how can we ourselves provide a diverse way of communicating information also, because I understand that there's a spectrum, right, of tangible to non-tangible form of communication, and ensuring that we distribute that and disseminate that accordingly to all of our community members and residents, so that nobody is overlooked or missed. And so it's been a great experience because, I'm learning alongside of our community members, and really just talking to them. And it's been a really small sample of people that I've had that conversation with thus far. But I do plan on a quarterly basis to work with those organizations and the schools and the businesses, to think about who's not at the table at that time, and consider inviting those groups or individuals at a later meeting, to ensure we're reaching the most people within our community. And so that's been part of the work for almost the first 90 days, I would say. And then really just reaching out to access funding opportunities, to build our infrastructure. I think one of the challenges right now is that we have an infrastructure of which that needs a lot of TLC, is what I will call it. And, resources, primarily funding resources, are, not readily available to us because we're a small city. And so being able to do the research and networking and accessing those funds is super important to, kind of maintain and sustain our infrastructure, but also bring it up to a level that is going to be sustainable for the future.
I want to talk a little bit about Granger Pride, and Granger has a tremendous sense of community pride. You've got a few things coming up in the near future. What are some of those things that make Granger unique? Why should people visit Granger?
So we are the city where the dinosaurs roam, of course, and it's a very unique, I would say, a tourist attraction, but it's not just outside of our community that attracts, people to come and learn more about Granger. In fact, a lot of our own community members and residents, they really take pride in the dinosaurs and the care of those dinosaurs, and they really always want to be a part of the preservation of those dinosaurs, because it's such a unique, I don't know what you would call it. It's a unique theme, if you will, for a city. And we are pretty well known and on the map because of these dinosaurs. And so a lot of our community members take a great pride and sense of community when it comes to preserving the dinosaurs. Um, and that's just one of the things that kind of brings us together. The other thing that really a lot of individuals in our community take pride in is the kickoff, if you will, of the festivals that occur throughout the Lower Yakima Valley. So Granger is the city that kicks off that festival season, if you will, that takes place throughout the Lower Yakima Valley with the Cherry Festival. And that usually primarily happens in April, which is coming up pretty soon. In fact, April 12th, 13th, and 14th is when we have our Cherry Festival. And that is the time when a lot of our community members come in and they take pride in by participating in the parade. And they participate in the activities that take place in our downtown city park. They enjoy the festivities related to the entertainment, the diverse amount of entertainment that is provided during that time. And it really is a kickoff, if you will, of the community engagement activities that will take place thereafter. So things such as Menudo Festival and the 4th of July, fireworks season. And then Earth Day, we have some community members that, take part in Earth Day, and then the preservation of the dinosaurs. And so it really is a good way for us to kind of kick off the spring season, the festival season, right? The season where everybody comes together and they join and just really enjoy each other's time as a community and take part in a lot of the events. And so I think that's one of the things that our city community members take pride in, is that we are that kind of jumpstart to all of the festivities and then the opportunities for communities to engage. Because the other thing is that neighboring cities then take part in that process within their respective cities, and it allows for our community members to be a part of that. And so I really truly believe that it's something that Granger community, or as a community, takes pride in, because they get to also take part in that in other neighboring cities.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, they recently opened the historical, is it the historical preservation? You recently opened a museum, didn't you?
Yeah, so we have a great group of individuals who work together very diligently, the Historical Society, the Granger Historical Society, who have done an amazing job in raising funds and working together to have a museum, a Historical Society museum built right behind and adjacent to Radio Cadena. It's a beautiful facility, of which the individuals within the Historical Society are working diligently to start transitioning all of the historical arts, equipment, items that have been preserved to this historical museum, so that we could possibly have that open up in the late spring, early summer season. And so we're really excited about that because we can finally have a bigger facility that centrally houses all of the historical aspects of the city of Granger. And so we're really excited about that coming up in the late spring, early summer, to offer that and extend that out to, of course, the community and everybody who passes through the city of Granger. And so we have a great group of folks who are just working really hard to ensure that all of the historical aspects of the city of Granger are well preserved and then maintained and then housed in a centrally located area. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It sounds like a wonderful opportunity for visitors and residents alike.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Yes.
Now, I do want to talk about some of the challenges. There are definitely challenges in many of our smaller communities in the Lower Valley. Can you talk about some of the challenges that you see now, and maybe some of the things that may be challenging in the future for Granger?
Yeah. So, I think there isn't really a happy medium, if you will, in terms of, being a small city or a large city. I think, despite the size, there's going to be some challenges, right? I would say that the challenges for small cities, and particularly Granger, right, is that there isn't currently what I would say a healthy balance between the economic growth and the residential growth. So we have this scale, if you will, that hasn't quite balanced enough so that we could have a balanced, economic and growth plan, if you will, or development of that plan, to be sustainable in the needs of the community. And that, that poses some challenges because then we have some limitations in the resources that we could provide our community. We have some limitations in the economic growth, right, of our community. We have some limitations to the potential future opportunity for people to come and reside in Granger, because we just don't have the equivalent amount of, or the balance, right, amount of businesses related to residential, units. And so that's one of the challenges right now that I'm grappling with, and working with in collaboration with a lot of entities and local individuals, to try to kind of grapple with, sit with the problem rather, and the challenge, and then figure out how do we want to move forward so that in the future we don't really necessarily come up with this challenge, but more so have the opposite of that, right? It's the good problem of, oh my goodness, now we're too overgrown, right? How do we slow it down a little bit? And I don't think we're quite there yet. So that's one of the challenges, I would say, that as a small city, it's really balancing that out and being able to have the resources available to be able to do that work. That's the other challenge. We don't necessarily have a grant writer to help us exclusively write for grants. Thankfully, I do have that experience. I have a pretty good wealth of knowledge in grant writing. And we do have resources available to us, like HLA Engineering, Yakima Valley Conference of Governance, to provide us with the technical assistance to be able to process and submit grants so that we can access those resources, outside of our city business structure. But of course that takes money. And so how are we strategically planning for and paying for those costs? And it's really being diligent with our spending, and being very frugal with our spending, and ensuring that we're not spending unnecessarily, and ensuring that we're spending according to what our needs are and not spending outside of our means. And so that way we can have and accumulate a cost savings to be able to afford those opportunities in the future, in terms of providing extra support to meet that technical assistance that we require for those grants to be submitted. And so those are the challenges, but with strategy and development, in terms of networking, that really helps. It really helps, reaching out to other elected officials and local leaders about how they do things, so that way we could either mirror it or mirror those practices rather, and tailor them to the city of Granger. So then that way we don't reinvent the wheel either, because then we're wasting time by doing that. And so that's another untapped resource that I think will lend us some future opportunities along the way. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked about a lot of things. I want to go back to some of the more positive things, and some of the things you've talked a lot about, some of the things that you think are special about Granger. What do you think what's the most special thing about Granger to you personally?
To me, I feel like the small nature, the size of Granger is so intimate, if you will, and intimate in such a way where I can go, anywhere throughout Granger and I know somebody, right? And somebody knows me. And I think that's true across the board for a lot of people in our community, is that everybody knows everybody. There's this real sense of community, more like a family, rather than a community. And everybody looks out for each other. Everybody is in the know about, like in my neighborhood alone, I know everybody in the block of my neighborhood, and we all take care of each other. And, if there is an issue, if our dog's across the street or outside of the fence, oh, your dog's across the street, and oh, will you just take them and walk them over? And, they'll just kindly do that. Right. And so it's more of a community that's like family. And I really appreciate that. I've known what it's like to live in a big city, and it's really impersonal. It's a very impersonal feeling to live in a big city, because it's just not the same. And having grown up in Granger and then moved to a city and feel that way, it just doesn't feel like home. And home is what you make it, of course, but when it feels, when like in a sense, the community of which I live in feels like home, because I know everybody. It feels like home because I'm not a stranger. It feels like home because it feels like family. It feels like home because people support the work that I do. It feels like home because people believe in me and what I do. I'm a part of the fabric that's been woven through and is a part of Granger. And so that's why it makes it unique and special to me, because I'm a piece of that thread, right? That makes up the fabric of Granger.
And it's that small town community. I know I'm from a small community too, and I feel the same way. You spoke about the Lower Valley. I had a Granger address at one point. I lived by Pumpkin Center. I've lived in Toppenish, Zilla, all over, and it's the small communities that bring us together, and it is like a family. And the people next door to you are going to have your back in those situations. So we've talked about a lot of stuff. We're running out of time here a little bit. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about anything else that you would like to say to our viewers.
What I'll encourage people to do, and that I'm also encouraging people within my community to do, is come in, right? Go into your local office and get to know the people that are doing the groundwork for you, right? And I say that because it's an investment that people in the community are making, right? And it is their money that is at work, right? And if you're spending that money, you want to know what your money is being spent on, right? So take the time to get to know those people that are doing the work on the ground, right? Go to the city hall, talk to people. Go to your planning department, talk to people. Go to public works and talk to your people. Go to the police department and fire department and talk to your people. And mostly go to your mayor's office and talk to your mayor. Get to know them, right? I really am encouraging people to do that, because there's almost this daunting culture about going to city hall and meeting with officials. And I'll tell you, we're people just like anybody else, right? And I've had a great amount of people come into my office, and I'm so happy that they come in, and they feel welcome, they feel invited, and they feel like, oh my gosh, this is my first, and they communicate to me, this is my first time being here, and thank you for letting me come back here. And I'm like, this is your city hall. I'm just borrowing it. I think that's the message that I want people to know, is that, it's your dollars, it's your investment. Take the time to get to know what your investment looks like, and get to know those people and just have conversations with them, and just know that, we're willing. And it's a really great thing to do, and it builds a different perspective than what people usually have. And it's because, generally people make assumptions, but it's because they don't know. And, you won't know until you know. And when you know, then you know.
Yes, and community involvement and people that step up and do learn a little bit about how the government works and how their community works, I think appreciate it more and appreciate the services more. And I know you're very open and willing to share that with anybody, and that's why we're doing this interview, is to help share some information with our community. So I sincerely appreciate your time. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to having more conversations with you in the future.
You're welcome. Thank you, Sean, for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Okay. I thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us today.